This is Adam Gorney with the new Respect My Decision podcast. Very special guest, new national recruiting analyst John Garcia here with us. Good to have you, man.
Of course, Adam. Been a long time coming for this one. So excited to be on this podcast. It feels more official now with you.
Yeah, definitely official. This is good. So you were at IMG. Today is Thursday. You were there Wednesday. Saw a lot of guys. You told me that they were going pretty hard. They were going pretty good during practice there. Who kind of caught your eye? Who were you like, wow, this is definitely someone who has impressed me here?
Well, look, it's two layers every time you go to IMG, right? It's first, hey, let's reconnect with the guys that you know, the Jarek Gibsons that have been there, David Stones of the world. And then the other layer is like, who's new? Because every single time you go, there's a new batch of prospects. And on both sides of the coin, of course, many impressed. Stone was great, 6'5", 280, carries it incredibly well, very long, can rush inside or out. I think continues to live up to that blue chip status, and he's kind of the leader now. Every year there's turnover at IMG. So outside of the athleticism in the game, you're like, hey, who is going to galvanize the roster? I think defensively, it's going to be David Stone. And at the same time, Jarek Gibson offensively looks to be that guy, very comfortable out of the backfield. He's gotten a little bit bigger, which I think is a good sign relative to his collegiate ceiling. Of course, Jarek, an elite blue chip running back prospect. But the new guys, you got to spend more time on them. I hadn't seen Jordan Seton before, big time offensive lineman out of the DC area. I think he moved in April, so just in time for spring ball. And my goodness, all of 6'6", 285 or so, just that classic tackle profile. I think he's going to add a ton of weight and maybe kick inside at the next level, but there's so much polish there that I'm not sure right tackle is out of the conversation. And since that move, a lot of SEC schools have felt better about their chances for Seton, who is still uncommitted among the Rivals 100 offensive linemen. So he was incredibly impressive and a great kid, very thorough in that conversation that we'll, of course, have featured later this weekend on Rivals.com. But let me tell you, in the class of 25 and even 26, some of the new guys at IMG impressed. I think Turbo Rogers, the running back from Alabama, as his name would indicate, whether he's a running back, a slot, a return man, I mean, just unbelievable wheels. There really wasn't anyone who could keep up with him from a speed standpoint, which is a very big deal, of course, when you're talking about IMG Academy kids. But I think the guy who held the most buzz from the moment I got there to the moment I left was another 2025. It was Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, who, of course, is his older brother's in the NFL, so we understand the bloodlines, kid out of Virginia. You talk about a modern linebacker, 6'1", 210, and he was about the only defender that could keep up with Turbo, even though he's much bigger. So I think the sky is truly the limit there, a true modern three-down linebacker. So as usual, IMG crushes the look test, and it's layered through multiple classes at the same time.
You talked about getting layers at IMG, and the first layer is Don Zalati. What a gentleman! I mean, what a friend of the program, really.
100%.
I had to shout him out, but some other guys, Winston Watkins, a guy I've loved for a long time, kind of like that 21st century receiver, just super fast, super electric, and getting a little bigger. Was he there, and what'd you think?
Yeah, he's a little banged up, but once the one-on-ones got going, Ellis Robinson was barking a little bit. Naturally, he's a Georgia commitment. And sure enough, Winnie stepped up, and they went at it a few times, and it was theater. Obviously, the length of Robinson is tough to deal with at the line of scrimmage, but Winnie right there at the line, so tough to get hands on because he's so incredibly quick. And I agree, Adam, he does look a little bit bigger. Just a beast, just a kid who, from a route running perspective, is going to set up defensive backs and flip their hips more than your average high school wide receiver. But really, the acceleration and catch radius he provides, even though, he's 5'10", 5'11", I think that's where you start to feel like he could truly be different. And look, he's standing tall on that Colorado verbal commitment. So shout out to Coach Prime as well. Having Watkins on board is a very big deal. Him and Robinson going back and forth was about as good as it gets. That's how deep IMG is. We hadn't even talked about Watkins and Ellis Robinson, but it was always good to get out there, of course.
One more 2025 guy. The guy they've really been talking up and saying is going to be awesome this year is Donovan Johnson, the 2025 running back. Jacked up kid, kind of thick looking.
Very big.
What did you see from him? What did you think? And is he kind of that power back to kind of counter what they're going to do?
Yeah, it reminds me of when IMG had Noah Kane and Katron Allen a couple years ago, where it's like, I don't know if there's a change of pace between Donovan and Jarrett Gibson, but man, IMG is going to hammer folks just coming right downhill. Donovan looked incredibly thick, well built. I thought he moved really well relative to the size, and he was kind of comfortable out of the backfield. I was a little bit surprised by that. He banged knees with a linebacker early on, so he missed a little bit of time at the end of practice. Didn't get to talk to him. Hopefully he's doing okay, but was impressed with his build. He is going to push Jarrett Gibson for snaps basically right out of the gate. And as one O lineman there told me, there's no running back one at IMG. It's just whoever's in the game at that moment. And I think that's a huge credit to him because, Gibson is arguably a top 2 or 3 back in this entire class of 24. And he's been there at IMG. So he's more familiar with that system. So anybody pushing him, I think, is a testament to that person's ability.
Let's talk David Stone. Last summer, he told me in Atlanta at our Rivals Underclassmen Challenge that his mom didn't want him at Oklahoma. And it kind of like shocked me and I didn't really get into it too much with him because I didn't know the situation. But after talking to like 3 people around him, it's basically like, it's not that she hates Oklahoma. It's that she just wanted him to sort of venture out, maybe get away from like the crowd a little bit. Oklahoma has worked on that very hard and kind of has convinced her again that they have, processes in place to kind of keep him not safe, but sort of like, in the program and focused and all those kinds of things. What was your sense on, after talking to him, where his recruitment is? I think Michigan State's probably sliding a little bit. It feels like Oklahoma A&M. I could be wrong. Florida, maybe.
Yeah, that's the thing. You talk to David and he'll give you 8 teams and you're like, oh, okay, well, it can't really be this big. Florida's kind of a sneaky contender here. I think they're making up ground on that sort of Michigan State, Texas A&M battery. Look, Oklahoma, I think, is kind of by itself perceptionally in this recruitment. He was just back there for the spring game. It's the only official that he's for sure about right now, which I thought was interesting. He had talked about setting a Wisconsin trip and others in the month of June, and they're still to be determined, but the only one locked in is mid-June to Oklahoma. So clearly the Sooners are in good shape, but he kept talking up Florida. And the nugget there that surprised me to a degree, Adam, was he said Billy Napier among head coaches is the one he's dealing with the most consistently. He said Tucker and Venables are right there for Michigan State and Oklahoma respectively, but he said Florida's push has been pretty consistent under Billy Napier. Miami was brought up as well. Oregon still fighting to get him back on campus. So I think if mom wanted him to venture out and explore more, I don't know if there's an elite recruit that has been on as many campuses over the last year as David Stone. So that box appears to be checked. And now it's about making a decision. But Stone's got no timeline at the same time. So it could be today or it could be signing day, which of course keeps his name relevant and keeps the fascination around the programs feeling like they have a chance.
That's the interesting thing with Stone too is, one, Billy Napier is going to recruit very hands-on for the guys he wants. He actually loves recruiting as a head coach, which is different than the old Florida staff there. But Venables will too. He's not going to take a backseat to anybody. And so that will be an interesting clash if it goes down, how that plays out. But I have to get out of my mind, and I have over the last year or so, that David Stone is undersized because he no longer is all that undersized and he's getting bigger. And I think he told me he was 280. I don't know if he told you that too, but he's starting to look like that elite defensive tackle. He's never going to be that 320-pound kind of run stuffer kind of guy, but that's not what NFL teams want anymore either. So Stone is sort of that prototypical guy that NFL teams are looking for to kind of gap shoot more, right?
100%, rush from the outside in or flip it depending on down and distance. And that's what he's working on. First rep of one-on-ones with the linemen, he was at end rushing against Jordan Seton, who got the better of him, by the way. But once he moved inside, nobody was going to contend with Stone. So I think playing that tweener role is advantageous to his position projection at the next level. It keeps him versatile, and it'll probably allow him to be more free out there. You watch a kid like that, and he wants to play linebacker and safety and defensive end, defensive tackle. He's a grunt. He loves it. So I think trying to channel multiple positions is a selling point he's going to buy all the way into. So that's why so many programs, from a schematic standpoint, feel like they've got a really good shot because they could push him in one direction or the other. But yeah, he does look bigger, and it's a clean 280. It's not
Yeah.
sloppy. It looks like that IMG strength and conditioning program, as it has for many, is absolutely working out for Stone. And I expect him to be that modern, like you said, interior pass rusher who can flex out as needed, especially on early downs.
Let's talk Seton. We have 17 5-stars right now. We'll try to get to 32. We always try to reflect the first round of the NFL draft in our 5-star rankings. Jordan Seton sits at 19. He's listed at guard, but like you said, he has that length where he can go out to play tackle. He has that toughness and the size he could stay inside. That versatility is actually a good thing, right?
100%. Yeah, I think you could make an argument he could play 3 or 4 different offensive line positions. And that's something that we, of course, should value incredibly highly when considering that final ranking in December or January when it matters most. But yeah, I think the tackle guard conversation is going to be ongoing here. Does he have the best movement skills for a guy his size? Probably not. But
Yeah.
the polish he already has in his tool bag, I think does sort of compensate for some of that. Like I said, I mean, going head to head with Stone on the edge, I was expecting David to win both reps, if not splitting. And Seton really held his own with a speed rush and some counter moves inside. So he moves well enough and redirects well enough along with that polish to contend on the edge, especially I think if you're talking about him as a potential right tackle. And as the NFL draft has just shown us with the Darnell Wrights of the world, that position has increased in value and priority level over the last few years, just as the game has become more modernized and wide open and pass first. So yeah, I think he's going to contend all the way through the cycle, if I had to guess.
His recruitment could take, I think, a lot of twists and turns here. He's from DC. I think the sense was Ohio State, maybe Penn State, but then he goes and visits Georgia and absolutely loves it. Now he's in Florida. So what was your sense on what he's thinking recruiting wise and schools that are really like the serious contenders?
You painted the perfect picture, Adam. I think Big Ten programs were absolutely in the best shape before he made the move, but every single school, and he brought up like 5, every single school he brought up to me in person was an SEC school. He
Yeah.
mentioned Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and of course the long-standing contenders Georgia and Alabama. I think Florida just got him on campus soon after that move as well. So there's definitely more of a curiosity for SEC country, which happens a lot with kids who move down to IMG Academy. And I think the timeline here where he's in no rush is going to help those programs push even further into this recruitment, especially the non-Georgia Alabamas of the world. We expect them to contend for whoever they want. But I think your A&Ms, your Ole Misses, your Floridas in particular are going to have more of a shot as time goes on. And what's interesting about his plan, Adam, is he says he wants to take one official in the summer, and that will be a de facto leader. He wants to take the trip to the school that almost earns it through the communication and the consistency, and then take the rest of his officials in the fall ahead of a late year decision. So I thought that was an interesting strategy. You don't hear that very often with any recruit, especially among the elite like Jordan Seton is.
Yeah. Cornerback is a position this cycle that I think is sort of wide open in terms of who's the best one. I don't think there's a guaranteed Derek Stingley in this class. Guys that would be hard to push off that one line. We have Charles Lester number 1 right now, but Ellis Robinson is 2, and he's definitely going to push for that top spot. Definitely some others along the way. Jalen Mbakwe is a guy that I don't think gets enough credit in our rankings. Bryce West is an interesting kid from Cleveland, who's kind of battling with Ohio State and Michigan right now. Kobe Black looks like he's going to end up at Texas. Let's talk Ellis Robinson. Bigger kind of corner, more physical. Every time I see him, he seems to get bigger and more physical. Not necessarily the greatest thing for NFL corners, but what did you think of him, and what did you kind of take away from him as maybe the number 1 corner in the country?
Yeah, Robinson absolutely belongs in that potential CB1 conversation. As you mentioned, 6'1", probably pushing 6'2" at this point, 185 pounds, playing with a cast. I think he hurt his hand. So that strength of rerouting guys at the line of scrimmage is something that he's very much leaning into, to the point where whether it's a Winston Watkins or even a 6'6" tight end and Jonathan Eccles, he's going to line up at the line and challenge you there. But I do think that the fluidity, the stride, and the physicality of Robinson will help make up for maybe a lack of natural twitch compared to Mbakwe, compared to a Charles Lester. And there's also a lot of polish there. I mean, there was one coach there, I don't want to name him to get his phone blowing up a little bit. One coach there that told me that Robinson was the best DB at IMG last year as a junior. So anytime, again, you get into those type of conversations at a school like that, it does start to hold a little bit more weight. But I do think from an attitude standpoint, Ellis is all in on that part of it. You know, you don't want to throw out a Jalen Ramsey kind of name, but in terms of how he carries himself, that alpha cornerback mentality, he has all of that and more, and he plays like it. He will absolutely beat you up at the line of scrimmage, but he does have a little bit more fluidity than maybe his frame would suggest. But there's no doubt Lester and Mbakwe, even West, there's a lot of twitchier corners that are in contention as well. So I think Robinson will be sort of the counter from a length and polish standpoint compared to those guys.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too crazy about cornerback size. I mean, for a couple years there, we were kind of like leaning more toward the 6 foot and under guys just because of their speed and versatility. That's how the NFL draft was trending for those couple years, and we're always cognizant of those trends. But if you look, down the line this year, I mean, Devin Witherspoon was maybe arguably a stretch that high in the draft. But Julius Brents was 6'3" at corner. Joey Porter was 6'2". There's a lot of 6'1" guy. Christian Gonzalez is probably 6'1.5". They're all of them are pretty close to 200 pounds too. So I think Robinson is kind of like right in that fit, and not too big. Last guy, and then I'll let you go because I'm sure you have a lot to do. Jarrett Gibson, is he a lock to Texas, do you feel, or do you think other schools can kind of get in there?
There's no doubt that Texas is the team to beat. I mean, he even confirmed it on record, which, doesn't always happen this time of year. But I do think he's still waiting on something. There's no timeline. There's no slate where he's going to lock it in at a certain point. But there's still something he wants to vet relative to Texas. And I think some SEC schools, Tennessee, maybe even Florida in particular, is very close to Anthony Richardson, a fellow Gainesville native. Yeah. I do think that they're going to hang around in this recruitment. So it's probably Texas, but I don't think it's 100% at this point. And Jarek, again, he's not even focused on it. He didn't really want to talk recruiting very much. So I don't think it's as prevalent in his mind right now as just spring ball and getting better. So if this battle wears on even longer, obviously more time for the Tennessees, the Floridas, even Miami was brought up. Georgia's in there too, to try to come and make up some ground on the Longhorns, who no doubt are the clear leader. I don't want to undersell that part either.
All right. So who was the coach that said Ellis Robinson was the best corner at IMG last year?
He had red in his logo. That's as far as I'm going.
That is John Garcia, our new national recruiting analyst here at Rivals. I'm Adam Gorney, and that's the Respect My Decision podcast.